My parents picked my brother's birthday instead of attending the funeral of my wife and 2 kids. When I shared the heartbreaking news, my dad coldly said, "It's your brother's birthday. We won't be there." 6 months later, a single headline about me sent my whole family into pure panic when they discovered I had. What if the very people who were supposed to love you most abandoned you in your darkest hour? What if the path to true purpose was paved with unthinkable loss, fueled by a burning desire for justice? My name is Alex. I'm 39, and this isn't some fairy tale. This is my life. A messy tangle of love, brutal betrayal, and wounds that some days still feel like they'll never heal. Get comfortable, because I'm about to take you into a world where supermarkets aren't just places to shop, but battlegrounds of families, ambitions, and broken hearts. I grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a mansion so lavish, even the air smelled of old money. The Whitmore family, my family, was a dynasty. My father, Charles Whitmore, was the chairman and CEO of Whitmore Retail Group, a high-end supermarket empire that spanned America. Think gleaming shelves, Bordeaux wine, cheese from Provence, organic strawberries flown in from South America. Everything had to be exquisite. This was his world. And I was the eldest son, destined to inherit it all. "Alex," he'd say, his voice sharp as a blade, "you are the future of Whitmore retail. Don't let me down." I'd nod, a 10-year-old boy carrying the weight of an entire legacy, a legacy I didn't even understand. Our home felt more like a corporation than a family. My mother, Monica, floated through it in silk, her eyes often distant, trapped. My younger brother, Nathaniel, was my father's perfect carbon copy, always knowing how to please him. And me? I was the one who asked questions, the one who suffocated at dinner parties where stocks and real estate were the only topics. My life truly changed the day I met Elena. She was a light in my dark, carefully curated world. She was also the spark that ignited every tragedy that followed. It was my sophomore year at Stanford. Crisp autumn day, golden leaves everywhere. I was buried in an economics textbook when she walked into the library. She smelled like freshly brewed coffee, a fresh breeze in that stale air. Elena wasn't like anyone I'd ever known. Simple sweater, hair in a high ponytail, and brown eyes that sparkled like they held a million untold stories. She sat across from me, dropped a pen. I picked it up. Our fingers brushed. A jolt. "Thank you," she smiled, and I forgot where I was. "I'm Elena Lancaster." I tried to keep my voice steady. "Alex Whitmore." We talked for hours. She was brilliant, sharp, but with a sincerity that made me feel like I could finally shed the armor I'd worn my whole life. She spoke of her family, her father, Robert Lancaster, founder of Lancaster Market, a chain of budget supermarkets serving working-class communities. "My dad always says," Elena laughed, "everyone deserves to eat well, not just the wealthy." I chuckled, but a cold twinge hit my gut. Lancaster Market. That name wasn't new to me. It was the sworn enemy of Whitmore Retail Group. The Whitmores and the Lancasters. Two sides of the same coin, but as different as night and day. My father called Lancaster Market, those cheap supermarkets, with disdain. "They sell to people who don't know quality," he'd sneer. "They tarnish the retail industry." But Robert Lancaster, Elena's father, built his company on bringing quality food to every American household. They had free meal programs for kids in underserved areas. My father called it cheap PR. But to me, it was real. It was something Whitmore Retail, with all its money, could never achieve. The rivalry wasn't just talk. It was a full-blown war. Lawsuits, fights over real estate. Once my father and Robert Lancaster nearly came to blows at an industry conference. Nathaniel joked it was the war of the vegetable vendors. To me, it was a tragedy. Elena and I fell in love despite all the barriers. Our dates weren't fancy. We preferred burgers in a diner, laughing about economics exams. She'd jot ideas in a notebook. If we could deliver fresh produce within 24 hours at a low cost, her eyes would shine. People wouldn't have to choose between quality and their budget. I loved her passion, how she saw the world, not through wealth, but through simple values. But I knew our love was a ticking time bomb. My father would never accept her. Not just because she was a Lancaster, but because she represented everything he despised. The storm hit one winter evening. I brought Elena home to meet my family. I braced myself, but nothing could prepare me for this. The mansion glowed, the dining table set like a royal banquet. My mother offered a stiff smile. Nathaniel sat with his arms crossed, a scowl on his face. My father? He looked at Elena as if she were an intruder. Mom, Dad, this is Elena Lancaster, I introduced, my voice barely steady. She's studying with me at Stanford. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. You could hear the wall clock ticking. Then my father spoke, his voice cold as ice. Lancaster. Robert Lancaster's daughter. The one ruining the retail industry. Elena gripped my hand under the table, but she didn't back down. Mr. Whitmore, she said, clear and steady, my father built Lancaster Market to help people, not to ruin anyone. My father gave a mocking laugh that sent a chill down my spine. Help people? You think selling cheap goods to the poor is helping them? You're tarnishing this family's name, Alex. And you're disappointing me. That night ended in a horrific argument. My father stood, pointed at me, if you choose this girl, you're no longer my son. Nathaniel just sat there, a subtle smirk on his face. My mother bowed her head, clutching her napkin. I walked Elena to her car, apologizing. But she just shook her head, hugged me. Alex, I don't need your family to accept me. I just need you. The weeks that followed were worse. My father summoned me to his Manhattan office. A vast room overlooking the skyline, but it felt like a prison. He sat behind his desk, his eyes cold and piercing. I've made my decision. Nathaniel will inherit the company. You're no longer in the plan. The floor collapsed beneath me. Because of Elena? I asked, my voice hoarse. Because you've betrayed this family, he replied. You chose the daughter of our enemy, a girl unworthy of the Whitmore name. From now on, you're on your own. I left that office reeling. I'd lost my place, my father's approval, maybe my entire family. But when I called Elena and heard her warm voice, I knew. I'd made the right choice. She was my home. I visited the Lancasters in Portland. Their house was modest, a small wooden home with a vegetable garden. Robert Lancaster, Elena's father, welcomed me like an old friend. Worn shirt, calloused hands. Alex, he said, a hand on my shoulder, you love my daughter, and that's enough. I don't care who your father is. I looked at him, then at Elena beside him. For the first time in my life, I felt truly accepted. But I knew. The war between the Whitmores and the Lancasters wasn't just business. It was personal. And I was standing right on the dividing line. My story was just beginning. It wasn't about supermarkets or money anymore. It was about hearts, choices, and the price you pay when you dare to live true to yourself. 3 years later, I stood in front of a mirror in our small Seattle apartment, trying to tie my tie. My hands still trembled from those memories. 3 years since my father disowned me, since Nathaniel became heir, since I chose Elena. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw my father's cold, judging eyes. I didn't join Lancaster Market, even though Robert offered me a position multiple times. You have talent, he'd said. You could help us. But I declined. I wanted to stand on my own. Not to be known as the son-in-law propped up by his wife's family. Or maybe, deep down, a pang of guilt still lingered. Joining them felt like betraying my father. Not yet. So, I chose a different path. Fresh Route. A small logistics startup in Seattle focused on fresh food supply chains. My job, figure out how to get fresh produce from farms to consumers within 24 hours at the lowest possible cost. Grueling work. Long days, late nights. But I loved it. I loved creating something meaningful, working with people who didn't care whose son I was, only what I could do. Elena and I married a few months after graduation. A small church in Portland. No lavish reception, no Armani suits. Just the Lancaster family, a few Stanford friends, and a kind priest. Robert walked Elena down the aisle, his eyes shining with pride and a touch of sadness. You're my son now, Alex, he whispered, hugging me after the ceremony. Take care of her. No one from the Whitmore family showed up. I'd sent an invitation, of course, knowing they wouldn't come. My mother sent a brief text, Wishing you happiness, Alex. I'm sorry. My father? Nothing. Nathaniel posted a photo on social media, raising a glass at a Hamptons party. Congrats to my brother on his big day choosing love over family. A stab in the chest. But I didn't respond. Silence, I learned, could be the strongest reply. Seattle, where we settled, was green and mild. Our apartment, on the 5th floor, overlooked Puget Sound. Not the Greenwich Mansion, but it was ours. I remember moving in. Elena, amidst cardboard boxes, hands on her hips, laughing. Alex, we have a kitchen table. A real kitchen table. I laughed too, pulled her into my arms. Chaos everywhere, but we were happier than ever. 2 years later, Olivia was born. A miniature Elena. Big brown eyes, a radiant smile, and a stubborn streak that both charmed and exasperated me. When Olivia was 3, Marcus arrived. A quiet boy with my eyes. Watching them play on the living room floor, I felt it. The true meaning of life. Not gleaming shelves, not revenue numbers, not million-dollar deals. It was these moments. Olivia's laughter on a swing. Marcus babbling, "Papa," as I lifted him. Elena was the soul of our family. She worked part-time for a nonprofit, helping communities access fresh food. Evenings, she'd sit at the kitchen table, writing, discussing ideas for fresh root. If we could cut transportation costs by another 10%, her eyes would sparkle. We could get fresh carrots to even the poorest neighborhoods. I loved how she always thought of others. How she turned the simplest things into something extraordinary. But it wasn't all perfect. The Whitmore's shadow still loomed. My mother called sometimes, her voice laced with guilt, but never daring to challenge my father. "Alex, are you okay? How are the kids?" Brief answers. I knew she'd never stand up to him. Nathaniel was different. He relished reminding me I'd been cast out. Once, he sent an article about Whitmore retail. "Look at what you're missing. 5 new stores in California. Too bad for you." It cut deep. Not because I regretted leaving, but because a small part of me still hoped my family would change. I wrote letters to my mother, photos of Olivia and Marcus. Rarely a response. Once, a birthday card for Olivia with a $10,000 check. I returned it. "Thank you, Mom. But we don't need the money. We're happy." Life at Fresh Root wasn't easy. A small startup, competing with giants. 80-hour weeks sometimes. Dozing at my desk. Dark circles under my eyes. But Elena was always there. Hot coffee. A smile. "You're doing something amazing, Alex." Every Fresh Root truck means a family eating fresh produce. Don't give up. And I didn't. We developed a real-time tracking system. Delivery times cut from 48 hours to 24. Small farms trusted us. Revenue grew. I wasn't making millions like my father. But I was proud. My work had meaning. I was building something to make life better. One Sunday afternoon, Elena, Olivia, Marcus, and I had a picnic in a park. Olivia, 5, chased a butterfly. Marcus giggled on my shoulders. Elena lay on the blanket, reading, looking up at us with that gentle smile. "You know," she said, "sometimes I think we found paradise." I sat beside her, pulling her into my arms. "My paradise is you." She laughed, playfully punching my shoulder. So cheesy, Whitmore. It was a perfect moment. One of those you want to frame forever. But I didn't know. Just hours later, everything would shatter. That was the last picnic where I could hold Elena's hand, watch Olivia and Marcus run. We left the park as the sun set, golden light stretching across the lake. Olivia dozed in the back seat, clutching her butterfly kite. Marcus, half asleep, head resting on his sister's shoulder. Elena, beside me, softly humming a lullaby. I drove, my heart feeling like everything in the world was right. The road back to Seattle, a 2-lane highway winding through fields and forests. I kept a steady speed. Jazz on the radio. Elena reached over, her fingers intertwining tightly with mine. "Today was fun, wasn't it?" she said, her voice soft. "We should do this more often." I nodded, smiling. More often. Maybe next week my words were cut off. A blinding light. A massive container truck, a monstrous beast, veered across the center line. Heading straight for us. I only heard Elena scream. Alex, be careful. Before everything plunged into darkness, I woke in a stark white room. The sharp smell of antiseptic. My head throbbed. Left arm numb. A strange, vast emptiness gripped my chest. A nurse stood by my bed. You're awake, she said, gentle, cautious. Broken arm. Minor injuries. You're very lucky. Lucky? The word was a cruel joke. I tried to sit up, a wave of pain. My wife? My kids? Where are they? My voice was sandpaper. The nurse looked at me, her eyes starting away. I'll get the doctor, she said, hurrying out. A chill ran down my spine. I knew. I couldn't. The doctor entered. A middle-aged man with compassionate eyes. He sat beside my bed, his voice low. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. The accident, it was severe. Your wife and 2 children, they didn't make it. The world collapsed. I heard his words. But they weren't real. They couldn't be. Elena, her smile brighter than the sun, gone. Olivia, my little girl with curly hair, her laugh echoing, vanished. Marcus, my tiny son, who called Papa every time I walked in, gone. No, I whispered, shaking my head. No, you're wrong. They're fine. They have to be. The doctor put a hand on my shoulder. I shoved it away. Take me to them. I shouted, trying to stand despite the searing pain. Where are they? Elena. Olivia. Marcus. The nurse and doctor had to restrain me, injecting a sedative. I collapsed, tears streaming, but no sound. Only a vast, cold void swallowed everything I had ever loved. The days that followed were a nightmare. I lay in the hospital, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece it together. The truck driver. He'd fallen asleep. Lost control. Head on. He survived with a few scratches. My family? They didn't stand a chance. I didn't know what to feel about him. Anger? Hatred? Or just emptiness? I no longer had the strength to feel anything. Elena's parents flew from Portland immediately. They sat by my bedside, silently holding my hand. Margaret, Elena's mother, wept, her frail shoulders trembling. Alex, you're our son, she sobbed. We lost Elena and the kids, but we won't lose you. Robert didn't say much, but his eyes were filled with pain. He looked a decade older, as if the accident had taken a piece of his soul too. What do you need, Alex? He asked. Anything? Just tell me. I couldn't answer. What did I need? To turn back time. To hold Elena again. To hear Olivia's laugh. Marcus's voice. But time never grants such wishes. My own family, the Whitmores, were a different story. I called my mother, leaving a trembling voicemail. I hoped, even just a little, that they'd come. Set aside their pride. Be with me. But no one came. My mother called back, her voice heavy with guilt. Alex, I wanted to come, but your father, he wouldn't allow it. He said I shouldn't interfere with the life you chose. I gripped the phone, my chest constricting. Mom, I whispered, my wife and your 2 grandchildren are dead. Do you understand? They're dead. My mother sobbed over the phone, but she didn't come. My father said nothing. Later, I learned the painful truth. My father was busy hosting a birthday party for Nathaniel at the Greenwich Mansion. Expensive wine. High-profile guests. The funeral for my wife and 2 children was held in a small church in Portland. I stood before 3 coffins. 2 so tiny they shattered my heart. Olivia still held her butterfly kite in eternal sleep. Marcus, peaceful, like he was having a sweet dream. And Elena. She looked merely asleep. Her brown hair framing her face, her lips closed as if she had something left to say. I sent a funeral notice to the Whitmores, despite Robert's advice. They don't deserve it, Alex, he'd said, his voice thick with anger. But I sent it anyway. Foolishly hoping my father would see those 3 graves and realize he was wrong. But no one came. Not a formal condolence. Not a single message. I stood before the graves, clutching the crumpled eulogy, my heart broken. Robert stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. You're my son, he said, his voice firm despite his red-rimmed eyes. You lost your wife, your children. But you haven't lost your family. We're here, Alex. We'll always be here. I nodded. But inside I knew. I'd lost everything. Elena was my light. Olivia and Marcus were why I woke up each morning. Now, only a void. And I didn't know how to fill it. The weeks after the funeral, I lived like a shadow. Back in our Seattle apartment, everything reminded me of them. Olivia's pink dress hung in the closet. Marcus's tiny shoes sat in the corner. Elena's notebook, filled with ideas, lay open on the kitchen table. I couldn't touch them. Couldn't throw them away. Each night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to recall Elena's voice, Olivia's laugh, Marcus gripping my finger. But the harder I tried, the more they slipped away. Robert and Margaret visited often, bringing food, stories of Elena as a child. They tried to pull me from the abyss. But I knew they were hurting too. We were survivors, facing a world that no longer felt the same. One evening, alone in the dark apartment, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Not Robert. My mother. She stood there in a long coat, her eyes red. Alex, she trembled. I'm sorry I couldn't come to the funeral. Your father, he don't talk about him. I cut her off, my voice cold. Why are you here? She stepped inside, wrapped her arms around me. She was trembling. I wanted to see you, she whispered. I wanted to know if you're okay. I didn't answer. I wasn't okay. She knew it. But I let her stay. She was still my mother. We sat in silence. For the first time, I realized. She too was a victim of my father. Trapped in the gilded cage of the Whitmore family. But her presence couldn't ease my pain. It only reminded me that my family, the ones who should have been there, had chosen to stay out of my life. 6 months after the accident, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like a shadow. Couldn't let grief consume me. I stood before the mirror, staring into my own hollow eyes. You have to do something, Alex, I told myself. For Elena. For Olivia. For Marcus. I wrote a final letter to my father, mother, and Nathaniel. Brief. A few lines. I'm no longer part of the Whitmore family. Don't contact me again. I sent it. Turned off my phone. I sold all the shares my grandfather had left me in Whitmore Retail Group. A substantial sum, but I didn't need it. Money couldn't buy back what I'd lost. What I needed was a cold, decisive plan for revenge. No mercy. Then I called Robert Lancaster. Dad, I said, calling him that for the first time. I want to join Lancaster Market. I want to carry on what Elena dreamed of. Robert was silent for a moment. Then, his voice thick with emotion. Welcome home, son. I moved to Portland a week later. Robert and Margaret welcomed me like a son returning from war. Their wooden house, the same as ever. Vegetable garden. Faint smell of fresh bread. Margaret hugged me tightly, tears streaming. We'll get through this together, Alex, she said. For Elena. For the kids. I nodded. But inside, I knew. I hadn't come here just to heal. I came to fight. Not only for Elena, but for myself. The Whitmores had abandoned me. Now I would abandon them. Joining Lancaster Market sent shockwaves through the media. Disowned son of Charles Whitmore joins direct competitor. The headlines blared. Some called me a traitor. Others, a maverick. I couldn't have cared less. I wasn't doing this for fame. Or to prove anything to the world. I was doing it for Elena. For Olivia. For Marcus. And to find meaning in a life that had been shattered. Robert brought me into the leadership team as Director of Strategic Development. Lancaster Market's office was modest. No oil paintings, no New York skyline. But here I felt a warmth, a sincerity I'd never experienced in Greenwich. Employees called Robert Uncle Rob. They worked not for money, but for a shared belief, bringing good food to every American family. My first day, I sat in a meeting room with Robert and the other directors. Curious eyes. Some skeptical. You're Charles Whitmore's son, the finance director said, his tone guarded. Why are you here? I met his gaze, unflinching. I'm here because I believe in what Lancaster Market is doing. And because I want to carry on my wife's dream. Bringing fresh, affordable food to everyone. Not just the wealthy. The room fell silent. Then Robert smiled, placing a hand on my shoulder. That's the answer I wanted to hear, he said. Let's get to work, Alex. I threw myself into the job like a man running from his own shadow. Woke at 5 a.m. Reread Elena's notebook for inspiration. Proposed a new strategy. Leverage the logistics technology from fresh route to build a fresh, in 24 hours, distribution system. Simple, ambitious. Deliver fresh food from farms to stores within a day at the lowest cost possible. If it worked, Lancaster Market could compete directly with Whitmore Retail, especially in my father's untouchable strongholds, Chicago, Miami, Dallas. Robert backed me fully. You can do this, he said during a late-night meeting. Elena would be proud of you. Hearing her name made my heart clench. But I nodded, gripping my pen. I won't let you down, Dad. And for the first time, I felt it. I wasn't just working for Elena. I was working for myself. To prove I could stand tall without the Whitmore name. The Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign launched a few months later. My idea. Inspired by Elena's notebook. We weren't just selling food. We were telling a story. Ordinary families. Workers. Single mothers. People who didn't need to spend hundreds of dollars for a quality meal. Our ads appeared on TV, social media. Smiling farmers. Kids holding fresh apples. The message, Lancaster Market, good food for everyone. It was a direct blow to Whitmore Retail. My father, with his philosophy of luxury goods for the elite, couldn't fathom it. Middle-class customers, once Whitmore's backbone, were turning away. Articles compared us. Lancaster Market is redefining food retail while Whitmore Retail is stuck in the past. I read those articles, a mix of pride and vindication. But my greater purpose was clear. Elena was right. Everyone deserves to eat well. Not just the rich. One evening, working late, my phone rang. Nathaniel. I hesitated. Picked up. Hey, big brother, his voice, cold, mocking. Heard you're making waves at Lancaster Market. Congrats, trader. Nathaniel, I said, struggling to stay calm. If you're just calling to mock me, hang up. Oh no, he sneered. Just wanted to remind you, you're digging your own grave. Dad won't let this slide. You think you can beat Whitmore Retail? You're wrong. I didn't respond. Hung up. His words echoed. I knew my father. He never forgave challenges. And I, his eldest son, was now his greatest enemy. My small office at Lancaster Market headquarters. Fluorescent light. Papers and charts. My computer screen displayed the latest revenue data. Lancaster Market was growing. Not small steps. Leaps and bounds. The Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign had shaken the market. Our stores in Chicago, Miami, Dallas, once my father's impenetrable fortresses, now teemed with customers. Housewives, workers, even former Whitmore loyalists flocked to us for fresh, affordable produce. But I didn't get complacent. Every night, before bed, Elena's notebook. Her slanted handwriting. Fresh in 24 hours. Every family deserves it. Those words were the fire. The reason I woke up. The reason I threw myself into work like a man racing against time. I wasn't doing this to defeat my father, though a small part of me couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing Whitmore Retail falter. I was doing this for Elena. For Olivia. For Marcus. And to prove that a person could live true to their values, no matter the cost. One autumn morning, Robert called me into his office. Golden leaves falling outside. He sat behind his desk, silver hair gleaming, but his eyes as sharp as ever. Alex, he said, sliding a folder across the table. You've done what I never dared to dream. Lancaster Market is on everyone's lips. He smiled, but it held a hint of concern. Do you know what that means? I looked at him, waiting. It means Charles Whitmore won't sit idly by. He's losing market share, losing shareholders, losing his reputation. A man like Charles doesn't accept defeat. I nodded, unsurprised. I knew my father too well. He'd burn his empire to the ground before letting it fall into someone else's hands. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. Robert looked at me, his gaze softening. You remind me of Elena, he said. That same look. Never gives up. I clenched my fists. My heart tightened. Every mention of Elena brought her image to mind. Her radiant smile. Sparkling eyes. But I wouldn't let emotions pull me under. I had a mission. And I would see it through. Whitmore Retail began to crumble faster than I expected. Quarterly financial reports showed steady revenue decline, especially where Lancaster Market had expanded. Their stores in Chicago and Dallas closed. Unable to compete with our prices, our delivery speed. Middle-class customers, once captivated by Whitmore's glamour, realized they didn't need hundreds of dollars for olive oil or imported cheese. They wanted fresh, affordable food. And Lancaster Market was delivering it. I drew on my fresh route experience, optimizing Lancaster Market's supply chain. The fresh in 24 hours system wasn't just a slogan. It was a revolution. We partnered with local farms, using real-time tracking. Produce reached customers within a day of harvest. Suppliers, once hesitant, now lined up. They appreciated my transparent, efficient approach. And they saw the potential. But not everyone was pleased. Nathaniel began appearing in the media, trying to salvage Whitmore Retail's image. On CNBC, he sat upright, expensive suit, polished confidence. Whitmore Retail isn't just a supermarket chain. We're a symbol of sophistication and quality. Competitors like Lancaster Market may attract customers with low prices, but they'll never match our class. I turned off the TV, an uneasy feeling in my chest. Nathaniel could say what he wanted, but numbers don't lie. Whitmore Retail was losing ground. I knew they'd launch a counterattack. I just didn't expect it so quickly. One morning, reviewing revenue reports, Robert walked in, newspaper in hand. "You need to read this," he said, his voice tense. It was the Wall Street Journal. Bold headline: Whitmore Retail accuses Lancaster Market of copyright infringement in advertising campaign. The article quoted my father, Charles Whitmore, alleging our Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign copied an old Whitmore Retail campaign. He announced plans to sue Lancaster Market for millions. I read it. My blood boiled. This wasn't the first time. He'd used lawsuits to crush competitors before. He did it to Lancaster Market years ago, when Elena was a child. Now he was repeating history. But this time, I wasn't the 16-year-old in his boardroom. I was Alex, Lancaster Market's Director of Strategic Development. And I wouldn't let him win so easily. I convened our legal team immediately. "They have no evidence," I said, my voice firm. "Our campaign was built on Elena's ideas from her notebook. This is a dirty tactic. But we won't back down." The legal team agreed the lawsuit lacked a strong foundation, but warned, a legal battle could be lengthy, costly. "Charles Whitmore doesn't need to win," one lawyer said. "He just needs to distract us. Damage our reputation." I nodded. But inside, I knew. This wasn't just a lawsuit. It was a declaration of war. My father was sending a message. He still controlled the game. I couldn't escape his shadow. But he was wrong. I was no longer Alex Whitmore, the obedient eldest son. I was Alex, fighting for my wife's dream. And I wouldn't let him destroy it. The lawsuit dragged on for months. It didn't deter us. While lawyers handled paperwork, I focused on expanding Lancaster Market. 10 new stores in major cities. Atlanta to San Francisco. Each new store was a dagger to my father's pride. I imagined him in his Manhattan office, reading declining revenue reports, his face red with rage. But I didn't stop. I accelerated the Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign. New ads. Real families sharing how Lancaster Market changed their eating habits. One ad featured a single mother in Chicago. I used to think fresh food was only for the rich. Lancaster Market proved me wrong. Audiences loved those stories. Our revenue soared. Suppliers pulled away from Whitmore Retail. One of our biggest wins, a major California farmers cooperative emailed me. They wanted to shift their entire contract to us. "Your way of doing business is transparent," they wrote, "and respects us." It was a major victory. And it made me smile for the first time in months. The climax came at a national food retail conference in Las Vegas. I was invited to speak. As I stepped onto the stage, my heart pounded. Not from nerves. Because I knew my father was there. Somewhere in the audience. I didn't look for him. But I felt his gaze. Cold. Judgmental. Like the day he disowned me. I stood before hundreds of people, CEOs, journalists. I began my speech. Lancaster Market isn't just about selling food, I said, my voice clear and strong. We're about bringing hope. We believe every American family, rich or poor, deserves to eat well. We're not building a brand for the elite. We're building a brand for everyone. The crowd applauded. But I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to Elena, to Olivia, to Marcus. I was speaking to those who believed in me, and to myself. When I finished, a Forbes reporter stood up. Mr. Whitmore, do you think Lancaster Market's success is a declaration of war against Whitmore Retail, your father's company? I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, but the smile of a man who had found his path. I'm not declaring war on anyone, I said. I'm just doing what my wife, Elena Lancaster, dreamed of. Bringing good food to everyone. If that makes us a competitor to anyone, that's their problem, not mine. The crowd applauded again. Louder this time. I stepped off the stage, feeling a weight lifted. As I passed through the rows, I caught a glimpse of my father. Sitting in the back. His face hard as stone. He didn't clap. He didn't look at me. But I knew. He'd heard every word. After the conference, articles began to appear. Alexander Whitmore, the game changer in food retail. They called me the Whitmore Rebel. The man who abandoned his family legacy for a greater dream. Some even compared me to David slaying Goliath. I didn't like those comparisons. My father wasn't Goliath. He was just a man trapped by his own pride. Whitmore Retail continued to weaken. Shareholders questioned Nathaniel's competence as he buckled under pressure. A Bloomberg article revealed he'd spent millions on lavish, ineffective ad campaigns, while Lancaster Market won trust with authentic, relatable ones. Whitmore Retail stores closed. Their stock plummeted. One evening, working late, Robert walked into my office. Bottle of wine. 2 glasses. We need to celebrate, he said, radiant smile. Today, we officially surpassed Whitmore Retail in market share in 3 major states. I took the glass. Didn't drink. I looked at Robert. The man who had become a father to me in a way Charles Whitmore never could. Thank you, Dad, I said. For believing in me. Robert raised his glass, clinking it against mine. No, Alex, he said. Thank you for keeping Elena's dream alive. A week after that celebration, an email. Unfamiliar address. No sender name. Just a single line. Meet me at the Waldorf Astoria, New York, Friday, 7 p.m., Meeting Room 3, CW. I didn't need a full signature. Charles Whitmore. My father. He was finally ready to face me. I stared at the email, fingers hovering. Delete it? Part of me wanted to ignore him, let him drown in the ruins of his crumbling empire. But another part, the part that still carried Whitmore blood, couldn't turn away. I needed to look him in the eye, to hear him speak. If only to confirm I was right to cut ties. I replied, I'll be there. New York greeted me with a biting winter chill. Gusts of wind sweeping through streets glowing with Christmas lights. I stepped into the Waldorf Astoria, once the playground of the Whitmore family during lavish galas. The lobby was as opulent as I remembered. Marble columns. Golden light. But I was no longer the boy trailing behind my father in an oversized suit. I was Alex. A man who chose his own path. I wasn't here to beg for forgiveness. I was here to confront him. Meeting Room 3 was on an upper floor, overlooking Manhattan's skyline. I pushed open the door. My father was already there, seated at the head of the table. Perfectly tailored black suit. He looked older. Hair grayer. Lines around his eyes deeper. But his gaze? As sharp as ever. A blade. He didn't stand. Didn't greet me. Just gestured for me to sit. Alex, he said, his voice low, deliberate, as if weighing every word. You've done well. I didn't expect you to go this far with that cheap supermarket chain. I sat across from him, expression neutral. Lancaster Market isn't cheap, I said. We bring good food to everyone. Something Whitmore Retail has never done. He gave a dry, mocking laugh. A shiver down my spine. You still talk like a naive idealist, Alex. You think you're changing the world? You're just tearing down your family's legacy. I clenched my fists under the table, fighting the anger. Legacy? I asked, my voice low but sharp. What's your legacy, Dad? An empire built on arrogance? A family you were willing to abandon for the sake of your ego. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. You dare talk to me about family? You're the one who betrayed us. You chose that Lancaster girl, that low-class supermarket chain over Whitmore Retail. Did you think I'd stand by and watch you destroy everything I've built? I met his gaze, unflinching. I didn't destroy anything. You did that yourself. You chose Nathaniel's birthday party over the funeral of my wife and children. You chose your reputation over your family. That was your choice, not mine. The air grew heavy. My father fell silent. But I saw it. His hand trembled slightly on the table. For the first time in my life, a flicker of unease in his eyes. Not regret, but uncertainty. He stood, walked to the window, stared down at the city. Whitmore Retail is struggling, he said, his voice flat, like a financial report. Shareholders are pulling out. Nathaniel, he's not strong enough to hold the company together. I need you, Alex. Come back. Help me save it. You're still my son. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. Save the company? I asked. You think I'd come back after everything you've done? After you disowned me? After you didn't even show up to Elena's, Olivia's, or Marcus' funeral? He turned back. His face hardened. I was busy, he said, voice cold. I have responsibilities to the company, to the shareholders. You wouldn't understand. I stood, stepped closer. Just a few feet away. Busy? I said, my voice trembling with anger. Too busy to see your daughter-in-law and grandchildren one last time? Have you ever felt regret, Dad? Have you ever thought about how you chose Nathaniel's birthday party over standing by me when I lost everything? He didn't answer. He looked at me, his eyes clouded. Not with tears. With the emptiness of a man who had lost everything, yet refused to admit it. I shook my head. The last invisible thread between us snapped. I was your son, I said. But you buried me along with them. I turned. Walked out. Not looking back. As the door closed, I felt it. A strange sense of liberation. I was no longer Alex Whitmore, the eldest son of an empire. I was Alex, fighting for Elena's dream. And I wouldn't let anyone, not even my father, stop me. In the weeks that followed, Whitmore Retail continued to collapse. News reports detailed asset sales to pay debts. Nathaniel appeared on television, trying to maintain confidence, but his eyes betrayed panic. Major shareholders publicly criticized his confidence, calling him an unworthy heir. I didn't feel joy reading those reports. But I didn't feel pity either. Nathaniel had chosen to stand with my father. And now he faced the consequences. Lancaster Market, meanwhile, kept expanding. New stores in cities where Whitmore Retail once dominated. The Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign became a phenomenon. Studied in universities as a textbook example of value-driven marketing. Suppliers continued to abandon Whitmore Retail for us. I received emails from farmers, thanking Lancaster Market for giving them access to larger markets. One morning, Robert called me into his office. He slid a newspaper across the desk. Its headline blared, Whitmore Retail Files for Bankruptcy Protection. I read the article. It felt like a chapter of my life was closing. The company my father built. The one he hoped I'd inherit. Now, just a name in headlines. What do you think, Alex? Robert asked, his eyes searching mine. I folded the paper. Set it down. I don't think anything, I said. Whitmore Retail is no longer part of me. But Lancaster Market, that's my home. Robert nodded. A faint smile. You've done what I never dared dream. But you know, Alex, what I'm most proud of isn't the revenue or market share. It's you. A man who rose from the ashes and kept fighting. I smiled. The first time in months. A slight lightness in my heart. Thank you, Dad, I said. But this fight isn't over. We still have work to do. 2 years later, Lancaster Market was the dominant name in food retail. Over 60% market share across the U.S. A figure even Robert, with all his optimism, hadn't dreamed of. Our stores sprouted everywhere. Struggling neighborhoods in Detroit. Bustling suburbs in Los Angeles. The Eat Well Without Being Wealthy campaign was no longer just a slogan. It was a movement. A reminder that good food shouldn't be a privilege for the wealthy. But no matter how sweet Lancaster Market's successes were, they couldn't fill the void in my heart. I still saw Elena everywhere. The smell of morning coffee, Olivia's pink dress in the closet, Marcus's tiny shoes in the corner. I had achieved so much, but the cost was too great. I wondered if Elena would truly be proud, or if she'd want me to stop, to slow down, find some peace. One autumn afternoon, Robert called me into his office. He looked older, but that same warm smile. "Alex," he said softly, "I've decided to retire." I was stunned. "Retire, Dad? Lancaster Market is at its peak. You can't." He raised a hand, cutting me off. "I've worked my whole life, Alex. I built Lancaster Market from a single store. Now it's bigger than I ever dreamed. But I'm tired. I want to spend the time I have left with Margaret, with our garden, and maybe to remember Elena in a way I haven't had time to do." I nodded, a twinge of panic. Robert was the backbone, my anchor, the thought of him leaving. "And I want you to take over," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "You'll be the CEO of Lancaster Market." I opened my mouth to protest. He shook his head. "Don't say no, Alex. You're the right person. You understand Elena's dream, our values. You've proven that, not just to me, but to the world." I sat in silence. A wave swelled in my chest. CEO of Lancaster Market. Elena had teased me about it once, during those late nights at the kitchen table, dreaming wild dreams. "One day you'll run the whole retail world, Alex," she laughed, playfully punching my shoulder. "But don't let it make you arrogant, okay?" "I don't know if I'm worthy," I said, my voice thick. "I've done everything for Elena, but I still feel like I haven't done enough." Robert stood, walked around the desk, placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've done more than enough, Alex. You've made her dream a reality. Now do this for yourself. Live a life you're proud of." I nodded, tears welling, but I held them back. "I'll try, Dad," I said. "I promise." The day I officially became CEO, Lancaster Market held a small press conference. Reporters from across the country, cameras flashing. I stood at the podium, tried to maintain calm. "I'm not here to build an empire," I said, my voice clear. "I'm here to carry on a legacy. Elena Lancaster's legacy, who believed everyone deserves to eat well and live well. Lancaster Market won't stop, because we're not just selling food. We're bringing hope." The crowd applauded. I looked down. Robert and Margaret stood in the front row, smiling. In that moment, I could almost see Elena standing beside them, her brown eyes shining brightly. I blinked. She was gone. But I knew. She was always there. In every decision I made, every step I took. That autumn, I returned to the cemetery in Portland, where Elena, Olivia, and Marcus rested. A small hill, oak trees blazing red under the setting sun. I walked along the path, carrying a bouquet of daisies, Elena's favorite. I knelt before the 3 graves, placing a daisy on each one. "I did it, Elena," I whispered, my voice soft enough for only the wind to hear. "Lancaster Market is for everyone now, just like you always wanted." I kept my promise. I touched Olivia's headstone, then Marcus. My heart constricted. "I wish you and the kids were here to see it." I sat there in silence. Memories flooded back. Olivia's laughter chasing her butterfly kite. Marcus gripping my finger. Elena's smile, looking at me as if I were her entire world. Those memories were painful, but they were also my strength. They reminded me that I had lived, had loved, and no matter how great the loss, I still had a reason to keep going. A soft breeze swept through, carrying the scent of bread. A sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I stood, looking out at the hill, where the sun was painting the sky brilliant orange. "Thank you, Elena," I whispered, "for giving me a reason to live." In the years that followed, Lancaster Market continued to grow. But I was no longer just a man driven by a fight. I learned to slow down, as Robert had advised. I spent time with him and Margaret, helping them tend their small garden. I started a charitable foundation in Elena's name, providing free food to children in underserved neighborhoods. Every time I saw a child holding a fresh apple and smiling, I saw Olivia. I saw Marcus. And I knew I was doing the right thing. As for the Whitmores, I cut off all contact. I heard my father had left New York, moving to a small house in the suburbs after Whitmore Retail's bankruptcy. Nathaniel tried to launch a new company, but failed. My mother sent letters occasionally, but I didn't respond. Not because I couldn't forgive, but because I had found a new family. The Lancasters. The people who believed in me. And the family of dreams I was living. My story ends here, but my life doesn't. Each day I wake up, carrying Elena, Olivia, and Marcus in my heart. I walk into the office, watching Lancaster Market's employees work with passion, and I know I found my purpose. I'm no longer Alex Whitmore, the eldest son of an empire. I'm Alex, a man who lost everything but found himself again, who turned pain into hope, and who will keep living for those I love and for myself. What would you have done in my place if you had lost everything and been betrayed by your own blood? Have you ever had to choose between family legacy and what you knew was right? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.